Dinosaur.
For 20 years. And that was it. 20 years. That is how long George Pig has been on our screens. 20 years of muddy puddles, family adventures, and George standing quietly in the background saying exactly this one word.
Dinosaur. Dinosaur.
That was it. That was his entire vocabulary for 2 full decades. Millions of children grew up watching this little pig and just accepted it. George is quiet. George loves dinosaurs. George cries sometimes. That is just who George is. Except it was never the whole story. We now know that George has moderate hearing loss. We covered the announcement, the trailers, the teasers, but those were just fragments. Pieces of something bigger that we could not fully see yet. Now the actual episodes are here. And they do not just show George getting a hearing aid and moving on. They show us what comes after. The sounds he can finally hear clearly. The moment he discovers what his own voice is capable of. And then, in a brand new episode called Favorite Sound, after 20 years of near silence, George Pig looks at his sister and says her name out loud for the very first time.
Yeah, Peppa.
Today we are breaking down everything that happens across these episodes. Because this is not just a storyline. This might be the most emotionally significant thing a children's cartoon has done in a very long time. George's Day in the Life. Before we get to the big moments, we need to start where the show started, with an episode called George's Day in the Life. It does something genuinely clever. It tells the story entirely from George's audio perspective. We do not just watch him move through his day. We hear what he hears. The ice cream van drives past, and the melody that every child in the neighborhood instantly recognizes comes through muffled and faint for George. Not broken, not completely absent, just different enough that it does not land the way it should. Peppa calls him from across the room, and her voice sounds distant, like something is always getting lost in the space between them.
He's a smart piggy.
Playgroup time, George. Huh?
What the episode quietly reveals is that George has spent years building workarounds. He watches faces instead of waiting for sounds to reach him. He waits for Peppa to tap his shoulder rather than calling his name because tapping is reliable in a way that voices across a room are not. He has constructed an entire system for navigating a world that was not quite reaching him. And he did it without anyone around him fully realizing that is what was happening. And then comes the detail that reframes 20 years of television in a single moment. Peppa had been helping him this whole time without knowing it, tapping his shoulder to get his attention, making sure she was facing him when she spoke, standing close instead of calling from a distance. She was not doing these things because someone told her to. She had simply learned over years that this was how you communicated with George. We spent 20 years thinking he was just a quiet toddler with a dinosaur obsession. Turns out he was navigating something much bigger than that the entire time. And his big sister had quietly been his bridge to the world without either of them ever having the words for it. The hearing test. The first new episode is called Hearing Test. The setup is simple. The whole family goes in for routine hearing checks. Nothing dramatic on the surface. Just one of those ordinary family appointments that fills an afternoon. George's results come back. Moderate hearing loss in his left ear. Right there in the doctor's office, the Pig family finds out what George has been carrying. He gets fitted with a hearing aid. Bright blue, small, and neat, sitting just behind his ear like it belongs there. Because it does. The class presentation. The follow-up episode, Hearing Aid, is where things get really interesting. George shows up at playgroup wearing his hearing aid for the first time. Susie Sheep immediately starts talking loud and slow, exaggerated, like George has suddenly forgotten how language works just because he is wearing something new behind his ear. Peppa steps in immediately. You don't have to talk loud and slow, Susie. Calm, matter of fact, not unkind. She is not just protecting her brother in that moment. She is teaching an entire classroom and every child watching at home how to actually treat someone who wears a hearing aid. You talk to them normally. You treat them like a person. Then Madame Gazelle asks George if he would like to explain to the class how he got his hearing aid. George freezes. All those eyes on him, and the words are not coming. Peppa leans over. You draw the pictures, and I'll tell the story. George picks up the pencil and starts drawing. The hospital. The hearing test. Except in George's version, the hearing test involves robots beeping and dinosaurs roaring. He's telling his own story, but telling it like George, with all the imagination that has always lived inside him but never had a stage quite like this one. And every time Peppa narrates a detail slightly wrong, George corrects her. Firmly, cheerfully, he is fact-checking his own sister in front of his entire class, not just participating in the story, but owning it, making sure it is told correctly because it is his story and the details matter to him. The final drawing is his hearing aid. The class cheers. Then the narrator closes the episode with a line so precise it stops you cold. George's hearing aid will always help him when he needs it, just like his big sister Peppa. Two things helping George navigate the world: his hearing aid and Peppa, the device and the person, the technology and the love. The show put them in the same sentence because they belong there. The butterfly. The episode everyone has been waiting for is called Favorite Sound, released on the 9th of March. Peppa has been showing George the world, not explaining it, not lecturing him, just sharing it the way an excited big sister shares things with someone she loves. With his hearing aid in, George is experiencing sounds he has technically heard before, but never with this kind of clarity. The ice cream van melody that was muffled and distant is coming through properly now. Birds, small sounds, ordinary sounds that most people walk past every day without registering. For George, right now, every single one of them feels new. Peppa wants to show him her favorite sound. The most Peppa Pig thing that has ever existed in 20 years of this show. Muddy puddles, the splash, the jump, the thing that has defined this series since the very first episode. She is out there jumping, being completely and entirely herself, sharing something she loves with someone she loves. Then George wanders off. He spots a butterfly and follows it quietly, curiously, the way George has always moved through the world, drawn towards small, beautiful things that catch his attention. Peppa is left standing by the puddles, genuinely, quietly hurt. She was trying to share something important, and he walked away without even meaning to. The butterfly is worth pausing on. George follows butterflies across multiple episodes in this arc. Even back in the Day in the Life episode, before the diagnosis, before any of this. A butterfly is the single most recognizable symbol of transformation in the natural world. The whole point of a butterfly is that it used to be something else. It went through something quiet and invisible to everyone watching from the outside. Then it came out the other side completely changed. That is George's arc. And the writers placed that butterfly there deliberately. It is not background detail. It is the whole metaphor made visible. Her name, Peppa, goes to Mummy Pig. She is standing there quietly, carrying a small hurt, not quite ready to talk about it, but not quite able to hold it in either. And while she is standing there, George comes over. He walks up to her. He looks at her face, and he says it. Peppa. One word. Her name. Clear as day. No dinosaur. No crying. No pointing or gesturing or waiting for someone else to bridge the gap. Just George, looking at his sister saying her name out loud for the first time in 20 years of television. Peppa's reaction says everything. The surprise, and the joy, and the disbelief, all arriving at exactly the same moment. You said my name. She has to say it out loud to confirm it happened. Like hearing it once was not quite enough to make it feel real. Think about what that single word actually contains. 20 years of George in the background. 20 years of Peppa tapping his shoulder, facing him when she talked, helping without ever being asked and without ever making it about herself. And the first real word he chooses, the first thing he says with his new voice in the way that matters most, is her name. Not a request, not a need, just her name. Because after everything, she is his favorite sound. Why this matters? Globally, 34 million children are deaf or hard of hearing. For many of them, preschool television is one of the first places they look to understand who gets to be the main character, who gets to have a story, who gets to grow and change and be seen. Nearly a quarter of deaf children in the UK are deaf in one ear. Moderate loss, exactly matching George. And 98% of parents of children with hearing loss believe that seeing deaf characters in children's television has a positive impact on their child's sense of self. Those numbers sit differently after watching George stand up in front of his class and draw robots and dinosaurs to explain his own diagnosis. After watching him correct Peppa mid-sentence because the details of his story matter to him. This is not a show that added a hearing aid for the sake of a headline. This is a show that took 20 years of established character history and found something true inside it. George was never just quiet. He was always navigating something. And now, finally, we get to watch him navigate it on his own terms. 20 years. One word, her name.